Sky Rose Ranch is a place that we bring veterans to heal. We have a veteran suicide rate of 23 a day and a divorce rate of 80 to 90% in our combat veterans. So our number one goal with the program is to combat those statistics, bringing a Christ-based healing to these warriors who risked it all and gave it all for our freedom.
Hey everybody, welcome to DRTV. I'm your host, Jay Friesen.
And I'm Brian Matson.
And we're on Above the Paygrade night right now with Chad Robichaux of Mighty Oaks, a ministry and organization that helps those with PTSD, combat veterans, and veterans of all. You know, and it's even cooler, Chad, because, you know, like we saw in the opening cut that I put together, you're like a beast, but yet your massive beastiness is turned into a ministry for others, and your whole life story has kind of come together to create the Mighty Oaks program.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Chad, you have an amazing resume. Okay, so 8 tours in Afghanistan. You're a mixed martial arts fighter. You're a minister. You're a PhD, and you're helping combat vets. Tell us, how did that happen? Tell us your life story. It's so fascinating.
Well, I think it, really is God's grace of allowing me to have the hardships in my life and come on the other side of them, and through the restoration He's offered us. I didn't realize until really now, looking backwards in my life, how many things I've been privileged to have the opportunity to be part of and do. And but the most privileged is now with Mighty Oaks. But it was a long road to get there.
Sure.
And it didn't come without a tremendous amount of hardship for me and my family. And I really believe that's the story of Mighty Oaks, and really the story of Christ in my life is what He's done is allowing the hardships of my life to be used in a way to point others to Him for a hope and a healing. And so for me, my military story is probably not the beginning, but I guess I could start there. I didn't have the best of childhoods. When I joined the Marine Corps at 17 years old, it was a brand new start for me. I had grew up with a father who's a Marine, and he, as a Vietnam Marine, he suffered with a lot of the same things that we see today with our other combat service members coming home. And so, the things he struggled with definitely impacted me as a young kid growing up without that father role or a good model of what a godly father could be. So, joining the Marine Corps, 17 years old, 1993. It was a brand new start at life. I had always wanted to be a Force Recon Marine. So I had prepared through my teenage years of running and swimming and getting ready to do that. And sure, enough, I got the chance to do it in my first year in and got accepted. And I did that training. As you can imagine, in special operations, all branches, there's a lot of training that goes in the beginning.
Sure.
But at that time in our country, we wasn't at war or anything. So you get all this training from 93 to 97, and not a lot was going on. So I decided to shift from active duty to the reserves, go to college, get some life experience, and maybe go back in as an officer. And so my life experience I got while I was going to college was to be a police officer in New Orleans. And yeah, so I did that. And then after 9/11 happened, we all know we've seen those planes flying into the World Trade Center buildings. We knew our life was going to be different, and for me it was. It took a little time, but I got to deploy, and as you said earlier, I got to deploy 8 times to Afghanistan, and in support of special operations efforts there. And I could tell you that I made a really distinct decision as a Christian. If you'd asked me if I was a Christian before Afghanistan, I would have said yes, because maybe it said it on my dog tags, or it was a check in the box.
Right.
I didn't really have a relationship with God at the time to understand what it meant to be a godly man or a warrior. So I made this decision that to do this job as a warrior in Afghanistan, I had to put my Christianity on a shelf.
Really?
There was not a place in that job, in that role, to be a warrior and this man of moral ethics and values. So I deliberately put that on my life, and I think in doing that, what I allowed to happen was allowed hate and bitterness to come into my life, into my heart, and it made me it made me at the time believe that I was this bad person. And that really eroded at me. I was just constantly angry, although I loved my job, and I kept continue wanting to go back. It brought some huge division between me and my wife, because I would come home and I didn't want to be home. I wanted to be back in Afghanistan, where I felt like I belonged, because my wife, who was just an amazing Christian woman, she just the presence of being around her made me feel very convicted, and so it was uncomfortable for me to be around her. And so as soon as she picked me up from the airport, before we even got to my house, I wanted to go back. It was in my mind I wanted to be back in Afghanistan, and obviously that brought some division into our home. And well, as the years went on of continuing to deploy that way, and my house wasn't a happy place to be in. My kids were scared of me. My wife was scared of me. I was just an angry, kind of bitter person. And eventually that would take its toll on me that I think I just had pushed myself so hard for so long. You know, probably wouldn't say it was one specific incident, this one traumatic incident, you know, impacted my life. It was
the tiny cracks suddenly slowly widened over time to make a chasm, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, and you know, I started having anxiety issues, but I wouldn't tell anyone because pride wouldn't let me admit that I was struggling with that. And I remember my very last deployment before I left, and I'm looking at my oldest son. His name's Hunter. He's actually in Marine Corps boot camp right now, and I looked at him and I knew something bad was going to happen. And I remember praying over him that when I didn't come home, that God would bring another father into his life. And that's, you know, just such a difficult prayer. He would be so like distraught of me leaving that because he was old enough to know his little legs would be weak, he couldn't stand, and I just hold him and he'd cry for like 2 days before I left. I just had some kind of impending sense of doom that something bad was going to happen, and it did. I had some terrible things happen on that last trip. I came home and I was diagnosed with PTSD. Now, like this is April of 07.
Sure.
And in April of 07, in the special operations community, the word PTSD wasn't a common word around work. So when that doctor said I had PTSD, I thought it was something I contracted. Like, oh wow, he figured out what's wrong with me. You know, he gave me a shot for it and sent me back overseas. But that really wasn't the case. As we all know, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder is something that it really took a toll on my life and turned my world upside down. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I had only knew how to do this for the last 4 years. I'd been doing this job that I was really good at, and I was getting praised for. And now, in one moment, I couldn't do that job anymore, and it just radically impacted my family and devastated us. My wife was scared, and so we were talking to the consular, and he's like, "What else do you like to do besides go to Afghanistan?"
He said kill people.
Well, I've done martial arts my whole life. At the time, I'd already fought professionally on the side, and my wife and my consular encouraged me to open a martial arts gym. And I tell you, the first time I got on those wrestling mats and grappled, I couldn't think of anything else besides the moment, because if you ever wrestled before and you start thinking about something else, your buddy's going to choke you.
Right.
So it was very therapeutic for me. I thought I found the perfect cure. But you could find the right medicine for a sickness and you could abuse it, and that's what I did. I spent the next 3 years of my life on those wrestling mats, just isolating myself there and use it as a crutch to not ever really heal, and put things back together in my family, and do what I need to do to be the man that God was really calling me to be. And I almost lost it all. I almost destroyed everything. I mean, if you looked at my life at the time, I had like this school. I had like 1,000 students in my school. I was fighting on Showtime and MTV and the big, Strike Force, Bellator, the big fights.
Sure.
And I was undefeated as a professional. So it looked like I had everything together. It was just this fake facade of success, and I was still dealing with panic attacks. I was dealing with, sleepless nights. I was dealing with anger. My wife and my kids my family was just falling apart. Me and my wife lived separate in our own home. And I had found myself surrounded by all these people that were just like telling me everything that I wanted to hear, but I had no one in my life to tell me what I needed to hear, and I needed to hear that I needed to get well, and I wasn't willing to do that. Anybody in my life that would have confronted me, I would have pushed them out, and so I was in this downward just spiral, and eventually it came crashing down. I mean, if you could imagine in that environment. I'm not a handsome guy. I'm 5'3". I got big ears from wrestling. But there's a lot of attention that comes from being an athlete. Sure. And so, it created an opportunity for me to, fall into relationships with other women. And I ended up in a relationship with another woman, and my wife found out, and I didn't care. And we separated. And it was, I thought that's what I had wanted at the time, because I thought if I could separate my family, because I was the problem. If I could separate my family from me, then they would be better off. But it put me in the deepest point of depression I'd ever been in my life, and I became extremely suicidal. I thought that I could if I could get out of the picture, my family would be better off. And I was in this apartment alone, and I was almost that statistic, that 23 veteran suicides a day. I was almost that statistic. But something that told me, I'd heard this tidbit of information that of every suicide, there's a 1/3 chance that your kids will commit suicide after you. I hear statistics all the time. I'm not sure if that's true, but it grabbed a hold of me, and I know my kids, my boys especially, have always done what I've done, and I didn't want to leave that legacy for them.
Wow.
And so that helped me hold on. And then one day, my wife, she came to me and she gave me this most confronting, this thing she challenged me with. It changed my life and changed it's the genesis of Mighty Oaks and our ministry that we do. She asked me this question. She said, how can you have done all these things in the military? So she's seen me be successful become a Force Recon Marine, these deployments, the training we do for these deployments to Afghanistan, and she's seen me do all this. She's seen the MMA stuff, like the fights and cutting weight. I lose all this weight for fights, and I always joke that, like, I love Doritos, and my kids have no respect for cutting weight, so they like eating pizza in front of me and ice cream. They're being funny because they've been around it their whole life, and I'm trying to lose all this weight to make weight for this fight, and they're taunting me, and I'm like, I had the discipline to be alone in my home, and a bag of Doritos laying there, and I pick up the chip and look at it, and I'm like, I'm not even gonna lick the nacho cheese off the back because I had that much discipline. So my wife would see this, and she's like, how can you do all these things, but when it comes to your family, you'll quit? And she was absolutely right. I had quit on all the most important things in my life. Everything I tried to do professionally in my life before, I had been extremely successful at. But when it came to my own health, my relationship with God, because I was angry at God, my relationship as a husband, as a father, I had quit on all those things in my life. And it was very difficult for me at the time to face that and realize that, one, she was right, and two, I was a quitter. And I had to make a big decision that day. And what I've learned in working with veterans and just looking at my own story is that we could blame all these things in our life, our childhood. We could say that it was the neighborhood I grew up in. It was this person did this to me. It's the government. If it was Afghanistan, it was my commanders. If this one thing wouldn't happen, if my buddy I should have been killed, not my buddy. All these incidents that we could blame it on, those things don't dictate the circumstance of our life. What dictates the circumstance of our life is the choices we make every day, and we never lose control of that. We always have the ability to make different choices. And then that day when Kathy convicted me with that question, I knew that I had a choice that I can make and do things differently. And I chose to get back up and try to pull my family back together and pull my marriage back together. And when I did that, I wouldn't say it was a faith-based decision, like God wasn't in there, because I was still like, well, I could do all this, but I'm still mad about God. And I'm not even sure I believe, and it was, so I really struggled with that. But the one thing I knew is I knew that I needed help, and I couldn't do it alone. And I believe God gave me that intuition, and I inventoried my life, and it was a really sad moment for me to realize I had all these friends, but I had no one that would hold me accountable for the things that I need to do and to be able to be successful in this fight. And so I allowed a mentor to come in my life, and we found him through our church. His name was Steve Toth. And I allowed Steve to come through my life, and I presented to him this elaborate plan, that my intellect and my work ethic would bring me to the point of being successful to put my marriage and family back together. And he's like, yeah, you know what? That's going to fail. You're going to end up right where you are right now because you're missing one key thing, and that's your relationship with Christ. And if you're going to do this, you need to build it on that.
Wow.
And so I allowed Steve to walk me through a process of restoring my relationship with Christ, and then a year-long mentorship process of teaching me what biblical manhood was, which was the problem all along. I didn't understand what it meant. It was the problem that I faced in Afghanistan when I'm thinking I had to separate my Christianity from me being a warrior and being a man and being this bold, courageous guy that I wanted to be, and realize that the two actually do go hand in hand. They were meant to go hand in hand, and God actually created us that way, and there is no contrast. And so Steve walked me through this blueprint of manhood, this biblical plan of what character looked like, what integrity looked like, what living with a legacy in mind looked like, what my marriage was supposed to look like. And through that, and building a relationship on top of a foundation of my relationship with Christ, that PTSD thing that was like huge and controlling everything, it became something that just became memories.
Wow.
And memories that instead of being ashamed of, that I'm actually proud of my service now. And it radically changed my life and changed everything. And when something like that happens to someone, especially someone like me, you can't help but share it with everyone else. And so people ask, like, how Mighty Oaks started, what is it you guys did? All I did was took this mentorship and blueprint of what Steve Toth did for me by showing me the man that God created me to be, and I passed it on to the next guy, and then he passed it on to the next guy, and that's all we're doing is we're beating PTSD by teaching biblical manhood. Period. It's as simple as that. And we've had almost 700 guys come through. This week will be 698, all high risk guys, and we've had 0 suicides.
Wow.
Graduates.
I love restoration. It seems like the last couple episodes in the show have revolved and centered around restoration and what God is doing in our lives, because we're such broken people, and that brokenness comes from, serving your country in Afghanistan. The brokenness comes from just being a jerk at home. I mean, the brokenness can come from anywhere, but God's like, I'm in this to restore you and restore other people. And when you get your relationship with me right, then we can start working on some of these other things. And that's a
Great story.
cool story.
Yeah, I'm just struck, Chad, by how isn't it true that we always do this where, okay, now I recognize the problem. Let me write out my action plan because I can fix the problem, right? And it's like God is saying, no, you're way more messed up than that. Your plan will fail. You need me. Well, tell us a little bit more, Chad. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. Tell us a little more about the Mighty Oaks program. How are you implementing this mentorship program? And is it just combat veterans that you work with?
Yeah, so Mighty Oaks is really focused on we start off with men, and most of the men we deal with are combat veterans. We are a veterans-focused ministry, so all the guys that come to our programs are veterans. Although, I'll make a point, they're not all combat veterans.
Sure.
If a guy raises his hand and willing to serve his country, then they qualify to come.
Yeah.
We do take the alumni and we bring the spouses to a spouses program, which is primarily females. So we have a male program, we have a female program, and then we bring these couples back to marriage advance. So that's the 3 programs we run. We're actually starting a 4th one that has to do with care providers, family members that need to be some help with being equipped to deal with their service members who don't want help. So, but I'll talk more about the men's program since it's 90% of what we do. And the men's program is focused on not only PTSD, which would be post-combat trauma, but also it deals with resiliency for our younger guys that may have a career ahead of them where they're going to see trauma, they're going to see the hardships, they're going to have to live through the culture in the military, which in many cases are very adverse to being a Christian, walking that Christian walk and living the life that God intended for us.
Right.
So we come in and we bring guys in. About half of our guys that come in are military orders from the Marine Corps and from the Navy, from the Army. We haven't got any orders from the Air Force yet, but we do get veterans, and it's really something to give God props for, because the guys that come on military orders are coming on military orders to a faith-based program.
Wow.
Which is phenomenal that the military will allow that. And so the guys come to us and we ask them this really simple question: if what you're doing in your life right now isn't working, then why not try something different? And at that point, if they came there, I could assure you that most of the things they're doing in their life isn't working. And so what we present to them different is we present this biblical blueprint of manhood. They're in a small control team, and every class we present comes from a testimony of a guy who's been there before them. So all of our instructors are alumni. So I'll give you an example. We teach a class on character. And so they'll hear this class on character, they'll hear the testimony of the instructor teaching this class on character, and then they'll break out in their group, and they'll contrast their own life to this model of character. And they'll come to their own conclusions of where they're off the marker, but now they have something to recalibrate it to. And what they have to recalibrate it to is the model. It's the model that God laid out for us.
Right.
And what we've seen is these guys make the most incredible choices to regain control of their life. And while they've been to all these cognitive and programs, there are 6-month inpatient programs for PTSD and nothing's worked. They come to us, and in only 6 days, they make the most important decisions of their life, and they regain control of their life, and we're seeing it just happen at amazing rate. And the Wounded Warrior Battalion, the Marine Corps, the commanders asked me before, how do you guys take them? And we send them to these 6-month programs, and they come to you in 6 days, and they come back different. And I'm like, sir, that's where you miss it. It's not 6 days. It's one moment, and it's one moment when a man makes a choice to live the life he was created to live. And it's been amazing to watch that process take place and see these guys who are just, obviously, they're warriors, they're leaders, they're brave and courageous,
Sure.
to take that courageous step to step into the life they were meant to live and find a purpose again.
It sounds to me like your program for healing PTSD is more radical than the world. It seems like a lot of programs are about managing,
Coping.
managing and dealing with, where you're offering people real freedom in Christ from PTSD. Sounds like that's being successful.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I could give you if I was the world's best psychologist and you had PTSD and I gave you the best coping skill in the world, I said this particular coping skill this will solve your PTSD. But the guy I gave that skill to was a train wreck and had no ability to implement that skill in his life. It wouldn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
And that's what we see. We see all these coping skills and methodologies, but these tools, while they may or may not be effective, it doesn't matter because the guys aren't willing to implement them in their life, nor are they capable to. So we go beyond that. We go beyond the PTSD and the incident that happened, and we look at the foundational mechanics of the man.
Yeah, who are you?
He does every day. And that man, if he gets his life back in line with what it was intended to look like, that man can make those decisions. That man can implement coping mechanisms in his life.
That's what makes it so radical, is you're not simply addressing the issue. You're going back to the root and saying the root is who you were created in God, your relationship with God, who God intended for you to be, and the life he intended for you to live. And once you get that, I mean, sometimes you just want to smack people upside the head and go, if you just figured out that it's really not about that, it's about you and God. If you just got that sorted, other things might fall into place. That's what makes it so radical. I mean, but only Christians can really do that.
Yeah.
And really, it's simplistic. It's so simplistic in nature.
Well, the gospel of Jesus Christ is simple but deep.
Yes.
Simple but deep. It sounds like you guys are going to the depths with these veterans. It just sounds like a terrific program,
cool.
Chad. Chad, I understand you've written a book. Is that right?
I did. It's called Redeployed, and I wrote it with another veteran who he struggled with more of the physical aspects. He was blown up by a suicide bomber, and I struggled more with the emotional and PTSD side of things. And so we wrote from two different perspectives on coming home. So we didn't talk much about spend a lot of time talking about Afghanistan. We talked about coming home, the battle within ourselves and the war at home, and trying to reintegrate and find purpose and hope again.
All right. Redeployed.
Redeployed, yeah. Now, where can people go to find out more about Mighty Oaks, find out how they can support your work over there, get involved, and then also grab a copy of your book?
Well, one, they could go to mightyoaksprograms.org. That's our website. You can learn more about the programs. You can learn more about our books and stuff like that. We have my wife and I have a marriage book coming out called Marriage Advance, and but also if you want to refer a veteran, I think everyone should know that it's free. It's free for veterans to come, for spouses to come. We don't charge the military. We don't take any government grants. We get all our support from a grateful nation that supports us, and we have an organization that we came under called Serving California. They match all of our support, so any monies we raise or any donations is matched by one donor. So
wow, fantastic!
About 50. It's amazing. It costs about $1,500 to get a guy through. So if anyone wants to scholarship someone, I mean, we need the help. We have a waiting list of guys trying to come through, but don't let that deter anyone from applying. We'll get people in.
That's cool.
And provide that hope. So,
man,
that's great. All right, so mightyoaksprograms.org is where you go to support Mighty Oaks and their ministry to suffering servicemen.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Chad. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, man. It's just really super cool.
Absolutely.
All right.
To find out more about Dead Reckoning, go to www.deadreckoning.tv. You can like us, share us, tell everybody about us, and then don't forget to tell everybody about Mighty Oaks and Chad Robichaux. With that, I'm Jay Friesen,
And I'm Brian Matson.
and this is DRTV.